Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video it is something a little bit different than usual because in this video I'll be talking about this bridge camera right here. It is the Canon Powershot SX10 IS. Quite a mouthful right there, but it is kind of a nice alternative in my opinion compared to the compact cameras that are skyrocketing in popularity but also in the price tags, because with this camera you still get that very nostalgic digital look but with the added benefit of having that zoom range and also more manual control. And in this video it's not a full review video, it's just my thought on this particular camera in case you're looking to similar bridge camera as well. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the Canon Powershot SX10 IS, still quite a mouthful. It is a camera that has been out for quite a long time now, since 2008, so you still get that very nostalgic digital look that many people are after. Of course, the style of this camera is not the stylish, super slim, compact camera that you get from that time period as well, but the image quality, the image resolution is all very similar, and the look from this particular sensor can also be very similar to those digital look from back then as well, because it's from the same time period and giving the very similar, if not identical, to many of other Canon's compact cameras from the time being, well, picture profile rather. So yeah, there is that. And in this video, just as usual, I'll be dividing it into 3 different sections. The first one is going to be the usability and the ergonomics, then follow into the image quality for both photography and a little bit on video, because it does actually shoot, especially you can see the stereo microphones in front, and then leading down into the conclusion, why I recommend it, why I don't recommend it, you know, my thoughts on this particular camera. So yeah, let's first dive into the ergonomics and the usability. First, when I first got this camera, I thought it would actually feel very plasticky. It is a little bit plasticky to a certain extent, but it is still quite a comfortable camera to use and hold, as well as, plasticky this grip looks, and as weird as this grip looks, it actually, for my hands, it fits quite nicely and quite comfortably. Of course, when you squeeze it a little bit, you do hear a little bit of the plastic creaking, but apart from that, it doesn't feel too plasticky, so that's actually quite nice. There is a very nice articulating screen as well if you want to take selfies, but the lens only goes as wide as 28 millimeters, which was actually quite wide for back then, but nowadays, you have your 24 millimeters on quite a few compact out there as well, and 24 is not just 4 millimeters wider, but it will feel much wider than 28 millimeters, which would also be my preferred focal length as well, 24. But this lens has a very useful tool, or weapon as I like to call it in this case, up its sleeves, because it has a 20x optical zoom. So it goes from 28 millimeter equivalent wide angle all the way to 560 millimeter telephoto range 35 millimeter equivalent. So that's actually quite a long zoom as well, so that's actually quite nice. On top of that, you do get the image stabilization with this particular lens, so that's actually a bonus on top of that as well, though I have to say that it doesn't always work super effectively in different situations. In some situations I find that it actually works a little bit more powerful. I don't know why it's not so consistent. I find that, some normal daylight shots, I would see more shake in the viewfinder or on the screen when I'm zooming in than sometimes when there's actually more wind, and then I would expect myself to see more shakiness on the actual viewfinder, but it's not always consistent, at least not with my particular copy. And talking about consistency, at least with my particular copy of the camera that I have, it's not really good to operate in super cold condition. And when I was testing it out, even though it's spring right now, but sometimes early in the morning, it is still around 0 degrees or 1 degree Celsius. And this lens still can show error signs sometimes if you're using this lens outside for a very long time. And you just have to kind of restart it 3 or 4 times until the camera starts working normally again. But of course, that's not a very huge problem for a lot of people. I think it's just on very few copies that are very old, this one included. So there is that. But despite being old, this camera still takes AA batteries, which is actually very convenient because many cameras from that time period has their own proprietary batteries, and in this case, in this day and age, you might not really find reliable brand new batteries to replace, as well as the battery chargers. So in my case, with the AA batteries, it works quite well because you can actually get rechargeable AA batteries and always recharge them yourself should you want to actually recharge them and, you know, continue using them rather than always having to buy new one each time you run out of batteries. So that's actually quite nice as well. And of course, the battery does last a long time, though it does depend on, you know, how powerful your battery is. And then moving on to the next point, which is the media storage. On the side, you have your SD card slot, which is something I'm very pleased to see. That's on the side of the camera, not on the bottom of the camera, because if you're mounting this camera on top of a tripod and then you're taking a few photos and you really want to change to a different memory card, at least it's on the side and it's accessible. Just mind you, it is a very old camera, so it doesn't take the highest capacity card or the fastest capacity card in here. Just for safety, I have a 1GB card in there and it's super plain and basic. But even with a 1GB card, it actually gets you through the day quite easily as well, so that's quite nice, versus 1GB nowadays would get you just a couple of images really. There is that. And then the buttons and dials on this camera, they all feel very nice apart from the wheel back here. I find that the wheel is a little bit too loose. I would like to have a little bit more friction on the wheel itself. But the mode dial, even though it's not super fixed, but it's so flushed enough that I don't accidentally hit the dial itself and change mode, so that's actually pretty good. And it's also flush enough that when I put it in my backpack or camera bag or some sort of sling bag or side messenger bag, things like that, it will not really accidentally change the mode either. So that's actually quite nice. And the on-off button, because it's up here, one would think that it's very easy to just accidentally knock and turn the camera on and off. Actually, no, it's actually quite pressure, so you really have to deliberately press it and then it will turn on, and then really press it again and then it will turn off. So there is a nice pressure to it, I find. The zoom, however, is very, very weird when it comes to speed. It doesn't really let's say adjust to the pressure that you push the lever. It just has its own speed, going very, very slow to very, very fast, or just, yeah, those two. It's not like, you can't really fine tune it somewhere in between like a camcorder would from that time period, so to speak. And then on the other point is the EVF, the electronic viewfinder on here. I rarely use it because in most cases this screen is actually adequate enough to actually use it in normal daylighting situations, although the viewing angle is not that great. It is a 2.5-inch LCD screen. It's not the most detailed screen out there, but it will get the job done in terms of the composition, representing the basic colors, so that you just get the main idea of, you know, roughly on the image on what you're going to get. But back to the EVF. The EVF is actually quite nice when you do use it, because you do have that option if the sun is shining too bright into the screen and you can't really see the screen. So it's always nice to put your camera up to your eye, and then you can actually frame it from the viewfinder, and you get the benefit of having that extra stabilization because you have another point of contact with the camera to your body. So it just adds that extra stability as well. So that's actually quite nice. This camera also offers manual focusing, but I never use it because you have to use the wheel for focusing, and that is just, I don't know, it's a little bit weird. Anyway, moving on to other ports. You rarely will use these ports. It's like the DC in, which you can leave this camera power on with an additional power adapter, so you don't always have to rely on the battery. And then you can plug this camera up to your television if you choose to do that. And there is the digital out, which is the USB, the mini USB cable going in here. So yeah, there is that. This camera also has its own flash, although you have to lift it up manually, and it's not too far away from the lens, which means when you're shooting portrait, please be careful of red eye effects. But nowadays it's also very easy to fix that red eye effect, and many people I've seen nowadays using compact digital cameras, they love that red eye effect so much because it's nostalgic. So take that with a grain of salt. But now moving on to the more operational side itself, the menu system on this camera is very nice. It is very easy to use, very user friendly, and you can actually get to different menu settings very easily. The only one downside about this camera that I first originally encountered is turning off the beep, the focus beep. So that took me a while to actually turn that off. It's not in the sound signal, it's somewhere else that I actually forgot right now, but I'm glad I actually managed to turn it off. So yeah, there's that. Apart from that, I find that all the other menu settings are very easy to use. Everything is very easy in reach. All the essential controls are also at your fingertips as well, so that's actually quite nice. And the quick menu on this camera is actually very convenient as well, because you can just reach to those quick menu very easily and then just change to your appropriate settings when you want to go more into the manual side of things on this particular camera. So yeah, there is that on this particular camera. On the operational side, the usability. Now into the image quality. The image quality out of this camera is actually quite nice. I personally quite enjoy the look of this particular camera, or the images coming out of the camera itself. It is JPEG only, however, it still has that nice kind of nostalgic color to it, which I personally somehow like from this camera. The dynamic range, as to be expected, it is not that great, however, but you still can kind of, work out how much dynamic range you really want based on different scenarios you're going to be shooting in, so there is that. And of course, with the extra manual control, you can actually dial in if you want to have bracketing shooting, or if you just want to kind of go a bit darker, so you reserve some of the highlights as well, rather than having some compact cameras with just full auto or semi-automatic that is still very automatic mode that you can't really change a lot. So that's actually quite nice about this camera. And also what I really like about the image quality out of this camera is it's able to render different color tones very nicely, especially for camera from back then. I think that the rendition and separations between each tones are very smooth, very clearly defined, and they're not really washed out so much, and the white balance is still quite nice, especially if you're using auto white balance. It's still quite accurate for the time of this camera that was launched, of course. And yeah, but on the downside though, it does have a very soft lens on the corner, and you will, well, not very soft, but soft enough on the corner. It does get better at around f3.5, sorry, around f4, around f5 and 5.6. It does get quite a bit sharper, and then after that I think it just falls into diffraction, so just be aware. But another downside is the flaring control is not very elegant on this particular lens. There is flaring, but I do like flaring as well, but I like nice elegant flaring, and this camera doesn't give you super elegant flaring, but it's also not super distracting either, so I think that's also quite nice. This camera, you will get a little bit of the color fringing on the sides of the corner of the lenses as well when you're shooting against very high contrast situations, so please be careful on that. But nowadays it is also very easy to fix later in post, of course. It's just a flick of a button in Lightroom, or just using some sliders in Lightroom as well. So yeah, it is not a big deal, but just to warn you that there are some color fringing on the corners when shooting against super contrasty situations, so please be aware of that. Otherwise, yeah, there's not much to complain about the image quality. I quite like it, and the colors are quite nice. I just wish that it would have raw files or raw mode built in, but it's totally okay. Oh, and for taking pictures, the highest shutter speed of this camera is 3200th of a second. So yeah, just be careful. Although I don't think you'll, gonna be using let's say more than that at some point, unless if you're really shooting against sunlight, because when you zoom in to a certain extent, you're going to be using quite high aperture anyway. And also with this camera you can use ISO 80, so with ISO 80 you can relatively keep the shutter speed down anyway, so that's actually quite nice that you can actually pick lower ISO speed, or actually picking ISO speed at all. So that's something that I really like about this particular camera. And yeah, talking about ISO, I wouldn't really use it over ISO 200 if you don't want to see noise, but I guess if you want to see some grain and some noise, add in 400 or 800 would be okay. It goes up all the way until 1600, I believe. So yeah, just take that with a grain of salt. But again, clean images are usually ISO 80, ISO 200, around that area. So just keep that in mind. And now into the video side of things. The video side of things, anything that is practically flaw in photography mode will be a bit more emphasized in video. It has a resolution of 640p, so not even high resolution. So yeah, but some people do like that, and you do get extra zoom with this particular camera, so there is that added benefit as well, which is actually quite nice. And the colors are still quite nice. Every rendition is quite nice. And if you're using the onboard microphone, assuming there aren't a lot of the external wind noise, you can actually record decent audio quality out of this out of this microphones as well, so that's actually quite good. But yeah, otherwise I would say it's also very practical to have a long zoom with IS. I do see a huge difference between with and without IS using this zoom lens in video mode, so there is that. But I don't really shoot video seriously with this camera. I only shot it for this particular video, just, you know, so that you have samples of the videos as well. So there is that. And now over into the conclusion. Well, overall I think that this camera is a great camera to use, although I have a smaller camera, but I personally enjoy using this camera a lot more. It is the Canon Powershot Pro 1. This is a much older camera. It is from 2004. It is a very light camera, but also a very professional feeling camera in my mind, or in my opinion, because it feels much more solid. You can't really have creaks with it. There's a top LCD screen, which is something that I really love. And also this lens is much better in terms of sharpness, in terms of keeping things in control, and just overall the contrast control, the chromatic aberration, color fringing, everything is just much better controlled with this lens, apart from the pin cushioning at the wide angle range. But yeah, it is an older camera. It is a lower resolution at 8 megapixels, but the files rendering out of this camera is slightly better. It is a very similar price point that you'll find nowadays with these two, so if you can find one for an affordable price, I would still recommend this one if you're more serious and also don't care about having 2 megapixels less. That being said, it is from 2004, so with a slower processor, you also have the typical slower operational by, you know, navigating through the images and menus of a 2004 camera. Although it's quite fast for 2004, but it's not really as fast as the Digicam processor in this particular camera, which is going to be a little bit faster, of course. But with this camera, it does feel a bit bigger and also a tiny bit more plasticky than the other camera. So just keep that in mind. It has a longer zoom, so that's actually quite nice. Even though it has a long zoom, I am aware that more recent compact cameras do also offer 20 times optical zoom, so it's going to be in a much more compact form factor, but that's also going to be in a much higher price range as well, so just keep that in mind. Otherwise, this camera has been a very fun camera to use. If you want a bit of manual control that still has that digital nostalgic look, then this camera is the camera that I would also highly recommend to look at, because I got mine for 30 euros and it's not one of those rare moment grabbing thing. It's been sold between 30 to 50 euros everywhere in all the marketplaces that I've seen on different market platforms. So yeah, it's not a rare price at 30 euros. Some are between 15 and 25, and some are around 30 to 50 euros depending on the condition of it. And for the performance, I really recommend you to try it out. So yeah, there is that. But the downside, of course, if you want to shoot RAW, this camera does not allow you to shoot RAW. If you want to shoot higher than 3200th of a second, this camera does not do that. But otherwise, it does allow you to do a lot of semi-professional things. Even mounting on a flash on here, that would still be, you know, very, very useful to a lot of people. So yeah, there is that. I would like to leave it there before this video gets any longer. I hope you can actually enjoy this video and take something from it as well. But otherwise, I thank you all very much for watching. If you need a free photography guidebook, it's absolutely for free on my website. Just click the link down in the description section below. If you want to watch a free photography tutorial or some paid ones as well, it's also on my website. The link is also down in the description section below as well. Otherwise, I thank you all very much for watching. Stay safe, have fun shooting. Until next time, bye for now.